From May 23, 1917, the story of General Mcclellan's dream reproduced in concrete form. Many men of middle age who were schoolboys during the Civil War recall the story of Washington's vision. During these preliminary days of our participation in the war, a vivid account of Mcclellan's dream, as related by Wesley Bradshaw, helps to relieve the tension. In camp and court, in tent and citadel, here is the story of the dream in concrete form. 2 o'clock of the third night after General McClellan's arrival in Washington to take command of the United States Army, found that justly celebrated soldier poring over several maps and reports of scouts. As the hour came, tolling through the night, together with the dull rumbling of the wagon and artillery wheels, the wearied hero, pushing from him his map and reports, leaned his forehead and on his folded arms upon the table before him, and he fell into a deep sleep, so deep that even the occasional booming of the heavy guns being placed in position on the entrenchments was insufficient to disturb him. "I could not have slumbered more than 10 minutes," said the general to an intimate friend to whom he narrated the strange narrative, "when I thought the door of my room, which I had carefully locked, was suddenly thrown open, and someone strode up to me, and laying a hand on my shoulder, and in a low, solemn voice said, 'General McClellan, do you sleep at your post? Rouse you, or ere it can be prevented, for the foe will be in Washington.' Never before in my life have I heard a voice possessing the commanding and even terrible tones of the one that addressed to me those words. And the sensation that passed through me, as it fell upon my ears, and I coweringly shrank into myself at the thought of my own negligence, I can only compare to the whistling, shrieking sweep of a storm of grape shot discharged directly through my brain. I could not move, however, although I tried hard to raise my head from the table, as a sense of my willingness and yet helplessness to make an answer to the unknown intruder oppressed me. I once more heard the same low, solemn voice repeat, 'General McClellan, do you sleep at your post?' There was a peculiarity about it, and at this time it seemed as though a mere atom of water was suspended in the center of an infinite space, and the voice came from a hollow distance all around me. As the last word was uttered, I regained by some felt and yet unknown power my volition, and with this change, the grape shot discharge sensation in my brain ceased, and a strange but new one seized my heart, one as if a huge rough icicle was being sawed back and forth through me. I started up, or rather I should say I thought I started up, for whether I was awake or asleep I'm not unable to decide. My first thought was about my maps, and before my eyelids had half opened, my hand was grasping them. But this was all. The table was still before me, and the maps, all crumpled in my tightening clutch, were still before me. But everything else had disappeared. The furniture was gone. The walls of the apartment were gone. The ceiling was not to be seen. All I saw was the tableau that I'm about to describe to you. Graphic portrayal of the Civil War situation during the early stages. My gaze was turned southward, and there, spread up and out before me, was a living map. Yes, a living map. That is the only expression I can think of as benefiting the scene. In one grand coup d'etat, my eye took in the whole expanse of country as far south as the Gulf of Mexico, and from the Atlantic Ocean on east to the Mississippi River westwardly. And before fully fixing my attention upon the immense scene, however, I thought of the mysterious visitant whose voice I had heard but a moment previous, and I looked toward him. An apparition stood at my left, somewhat in front, at a distance of about 6 feet from me. I sought for his features, hoping to recognize him, but I was disappointed, for the statue-like figure was naught but a vapor, a cloud, having only the general outline of a man. This troubled me, and I was turning the matter over in my mind when the shadowy visitor said, "General McClellan, your time is short. Look to the southward." And I felt unable to resist the command, even had I wished to do so. And again, therefore, my eyes were cast on the living map. Out on the Atlantic, I saw the various vessels of the blockading squadrons looming up and with most perfect distinctness in the bright moonshine that illuminated everything with a strong but mellow light. I saw Charleston Harbor and its forts, with their pacing sentinels and their sullen-looking barbette guns. My eyes followed the Gulf line all the way around into the Gulf, to New Orleans, and thence up the Mississippi, Fort Pickens, and in fact every fortification along the watery boundary. I beheld these as much as might distinctness as you, sir. See the corporal's guard passing there. See? The sight filled me with delightful surprise, but it would be utterly impossible for me to describe the ecstatic amazement that followed, as within the lights I mentioned, my eyes took in an imminent but lightning-like detail. Every mountain range, every hill, every valley, every forest, every meadow, every river, every city, every camp, every tent, every body of men, every sentinel, every earthwork, every cannon, and I may say, dispensing with further detail, every living and every dead thing, that no matter what its bulk or its height. My blood seemed to stop in its channels with joy as I thought that the knowledge and thereby advantages thus given me would ensure speedy and happy termination to the war. And this one idea was engrossing my mind when that same slow, solemn voice said, "General McClellan, take your map and note what you behold. Tarry not, your time is short." And I started, and glancing up at the unearthly speaker, saw him extend his arm and point southward. Still I saw no features. Smoothing out the largest and most accurate of my maps, I seized a pencil and once more bent my gaze out over the living map. As I looked this time, a cold chill ran through me, and that the huge rough icicle began its sawing motion through my heart yet again. I compared the map before me with the living map. I saw the masses of the enemy's forces being hurried to certain points so that as to thwart movements that within a day or two I intended to make at those identical points, while on the two particular approaches to Washington I beheld heavy columns posted for a concentrated attack that I instantly saw must succeed in its objective unless speedily prevented. "Treachery! Treachery!" cried I in despair, and as soon as my blood seemed to stop in its channels for joy, it now did so for fear. Ruin and defeat seemed to stare me in the face. At this dreadful moment, the same slow, solemn voice struck once more on my ear, saying, "General McClellan, you have been betrayed." And had not God willed otherwise, ere the sun of tomorrow had set, the Confederate flag would have waved above the Capitol and your own grave. But note what you see. Your time is short. Tarry not. Ere the words had left the lips of my vapory mentor, my pencil was flying with the speed of thought, transferring to the map before me all I saw upon the living map. Some mysterious and unearthly influence was upon me, and noted and recorded that the minutest point I beheld without the slightest effort, delay, or mistake. At last the task was done, and my pencil dropped from my fingers. For a while previous to this, however, I had come conscious that there was a shining of light on my left that steadily increased until the moment I ceased my task it became in an instant more intense than the noonday sun. And quickly I raised my eyes, and never where I do live for never and where I do live forever will I forget what I saw. The dim shadowy figure of a was no longer a dim, shadowy figure, but the glorified and refulgent spirit of Washington, the father of his country. And now, a second time, its savor. My friend, it would be utterly useless for me to attempt to describe the mighty returned spirit. I can only say that Washington, as I beheld him in my dream, as you may choose to term, it was the most godlike being I could ever have conceived of. Like a weak, dazzled bird, I sat gazing at the heavenly vision, and as I continued looking, an expression of sublime benignity came gently upon his visage, and for the last time I heard the slow and solemn voice saying to me something like this: General McClellan, while yet in the flesh I beheld the birth of the American Republic. It was indeed a hard and bloody one, but God's blessing was upon the nation, and therefore, through this her first great struggle for existence, He sustained her with His mighty hand, brought her out triumphantly, and a century has not passed since then, and yet the child republic has taken her position of peer with nations whose page of history extends for ages into the past. She has since those dark days, by the favor of God, greatly prospered, and now, by the very reason of this prosperity, has she been brought to her second great struggle. This is by far the most perilous ordeal she has endured, passing as is from childhood to opening maturity. She is called on to accomplish that vast result, self-conquest, to learn that important lesson, self-control, self-rule, that in the future will place her in the van of power and civilization. It is here that all nations have hitherto failed, and she too, the Republic of the Earth, had not God willed otherwise, would by tomorrow's sunset have been a broken heap of stones cast over the grave of human liberty. But her cries have come up out of her borders, like sweet incense unto heaven, and she will be saved. Thus shall peace once more come upon her, and prosperity fill her with joy. But her mission will not yet be finished, for ere another century shall have gone, and the oppressors of the earth, hating and envying her exaltation, shall join themselves together and rise up their hands against her. But if she still be found worthy of her high calling, they shall surely be discomforted, and then will be ended her third and last great struggle for existence. Therefore shall the Republic go on, increasing in goodness and power, until her borders shall end only in the remotest corners of the earth, and the whole earth shall beneath her shadowing wings become a universal republic. Let her, in her prosperity, however, remember the Lord her God, her trust always be with Him, and she shall never be confounded. The heavenly visitant ceased speaking, and as I still continued gazing upon him, drew near to me, and raised and spread out his hands above me. No sound now came from his lips, but I felt a strange influence coming over me. I reclined, my head forward, to receive the blessing, the baptism of Washington.